You've walked across them. You've seen them in tourist brochures. Those massive stone-arch bridges that span the rivers of Europe, Asia, and the Americas, we look at them and we see monuments of connection, triumphs of Roman engineering or medieval perseverance carved into our historical memory as simple pathways for horse, cart, and foot soldier. But what if that is just the story we're supposed to see? What if the visual reality of these structures contradicts the history books we've been given? When you strip away the official narrative, you aren't left with a bridge. You are left with a machine. We are talking about structures that are ridiculously over-engineered for simple travel. Structures that contain hidden chambers, conductive materials, and geometric alignments that serve no transport purpose, but align perfectly with the laws of resonance and energy. What if these weren't built by the Romans, or the Greeks, or the Victorians? What if they were left behind by a civilization we were never meant to know? A global power grid buried in a cataclysm that wiped the slate clean. The evidence has been hiding in plain sight, locked in the stones themselves. And tonight, we aren't just crossing the bridge. We're looking underneath it. Our story begins with a simple question that modern engineering struggles to answer. Why? Why do so many ancient bridges possess a level of structural integrity that rivals and often exceeds modern reinforced concrete? We are told that civilizations working with chisels, hammers, and wooden cranes built structures capable of supporting freight trains thousands of years before the invention of the locomotive. Look at the sheer scale. We aren't talking about simple crossings. We are talking about moving multi-ton blocks of granite, a stone so hard it destroys modern steel tools, and fitting them together with a precision that makes a sheet of paper feel thick. Historians attribute this to durability. They say the Romans built the Pont du Gard in France, or the Alcantara Bridge in Spain, to withstand floods in the march of time. But look closer at the design. The Pont du Gard is a three-tiered marvel. The official story is that it was an aqueduct, a simple water slide. But the gradient, the slope that allows the water to flow, is so infinitesimally precise, descending only inches over miles, that it challenges the capabilities of even modern laser surveying. If they were just moving water, why the massive conductive crystalline stone? Why the tiered arches that resemble the cooling fins of a radiator or a heat exchanger rather than a support beam? And it's not just in Europe. It's a global phenomenon. Proponents of the inherited world theory point to the devil's bridges found throughout Europe. Local folklore almost always attributes these bridges to the devil. Why? Because the local peasants admitted they didn't build them. They couldn't explain how they appeared. The structures were so impossible, so alien to their own capabilities, that they credited them to the supernatural. Perhaps the devil was just a medieval word for technology. Consider the materials. Many of these bridges are built with high-quartz content granite and sandstone. In the world of geology, quartz is piezoelectric. When you squeeze it, when you put it under the immense pressure of a gravity load arch, it generates an electric charge. Are we looking at bridges? Or are we looking at piezoelectric generators, pressing down on the earth to harness the energy of the river flowing beneath them? The mainstream says it's just rock. The engineering suggests it's a circuit. To understand the machine, we have to understand the ground it stands on. Or rather, the ground that buried it. This brings us to one of the most controversial and compelling theories of the last decade, the Great Mud Flood. If you walk the streets of London, Moscow, Prague, or even Seattle, you will notice a strange architectural anomaly. You look at a magnificent 18th or 19th century building, and you see windows. Beautiful, arched windows, cut off at the ankles by the sidewalk. Peer into the basement of these buildings, and you don't see a foundation. You see a first floor. You see doors that open into dirt. You see full architectural facades that have been buried 3, 4, 5 meters underground. The official explanation is the cultural layer. Archaeologists tell us that over centuries, dirt, horse manure, and trash piled up, slowly raising the street level. They also claim that in the 19th century, cities raised their streets to install sewage systems. But does that hold up? For the trash theory to work, the accumulation would have to be slow and uneven. Yet, we see this burial line acting uniformly across entire continents. And if you were raising a street to put in pipes, would you really bury the first floor of your Capitol building? Would you turn your grand entrance into a basement window? Or did something catastrophic happen? The mud flood theory suggests that a massive liquefaction event, a cataclysm of soil and water, inundated the world in the relatively recent past, perhaps the mid-1800s. The survivors, our recent ancestors, didn't build these cities. They dug them out. They inherited a world of giants and claimed it as their own. This recontextualizes the bridges. If the ground level rose by 10 or 20 feet, then the rivers rose too. The bridges we see today might only be the top tier of much deeper, more complex structures. We are looking at the tip of the iceberg, marveling at a footbridge, unaware that a massive hydraulic power plant sits silenced in the mud below. If there was a global civilization capable of this engineering, who were they? Why aren't they in the textbooks? This is where the rabbit hole opens up to reveal the ghost empire, Tartaria. If you go to the digital archives and pull up encyclopedias, maps, and globes from before 1850, you will find a massive territory labeled Grand Tartary, or Tartaria. It covers most of Asia, Russia, and parts of Europe. Modern historians dismiss this. They say Tartary was just a vague geographical placeholder, like saying the Wild West or the Orient. They claim it was inhabited by nomadic horsemen with no central government, no grand architecture, and certainly no advanced technology. But the maps tell a different story. They show massive cities, clearly marked capitals, and intricate trade routes connecting the east to the west long before the Silk Road was supposedly fully developed. Some flags of Tartaria display a griffin, a mythological creature representing the guardianship of gold and hidden knowledge, a symbol of power and vigilance that suggests a centralized, coherent empire. The theory argues that Tartaria was a global, technologically advanced civilization, a world order that prioritized free energy and architectural resonance. It posits that the Greco-Roman style we see in Washington, D.C., the Vatican, and ancient ruins isn't just a style, it's a standardized technological blueprint. The idea is that they were dismantled. Their population was wiped out or scattered by the mud flood, and their territory was absorbed by the rising powers of the Romanovs, the British Empire, and the New World. When you plot the locations of the world's most anomalous bridges, the ones with the impossible stonework, a surprising number fall perfectly within the old trade routes of this erased empire. It suggests that the columns, the domes, and the arches weren't built for beauty. They were built for conductivity. It suggests that this was a civilization that didn't just inhabit the world, they were plugged into it. So, if these bridges are machines built by a lost civilization, what did they actually do? To understand the machine, we have to understand the fuel. This brings us to the concept of the ether. Before Einstein and modern physics, scientists universally believed in the ether, an invisible field of energy that permeates the entire universe. Tesla believed in it. Steinmetz believed in it. They believed you could pull limitless energy directly from the atmosphere if you had the right antenna. Look at the old world cities. Look at the cathedrals, the Capitol buildings, and the bridges. What do they all have in common? Domes, spires, metal tips, copper roofs. The theory proposes that these cities were one giant circuit board. The cathedrals were the power stations, gathering atmospheric energy through their spires, which often contained mercury or other conductive elements. The star forts, those massive, geometrically perfect star-shaped islands found all over the world, were the nodes, the capacitors storing the charge. And the bridges? The bridges were the connectors. Water is a conductor. Running water creates a magnetic field. If you place a massive quartz-rich stone arch over a running current, and you design that arch with specific sacred geometry, you create a resonance chamber. You are essentially building a hydroacoustic generator. Let's go back to the Anishkov Bridge in St. Paul. Petersburg, there are rumors, persistent, hushed rumors, of sealed chambers inside the piers. Official blueprints from the 19th century show hollow voids labeled with terms that don't make sense for simple masonry. Some researchers suspect these were pressure equilibrium voids, designed to manipulate the flow of water to generate a specific frequency. Think about the starforts again. History says they were built for cannon fire, to deflect incoming attacks. But have you ever looked at them from above? They look exactly like somatic patterns. These are the geometric shapes created naturally when you play a specific sound frequency through water or sand. Why would you build a fort based on sound frequency? Why would you surround it with a moat of water? Unless the fort and the bridge connected to it were vibrating. Unless they were humming. The theory suggests these bridges regulated the energy grid. They didn't just cross the water, they energized it. They used the flow of the river to ground the atmospheric charge pulled down by the obelisks and towers of the city. It was a wireless, free energy grid that spanned the planet. Imagine a world where the air itself hummed with power, where you didn't need coal or oil or wires. You just needed to be near the water. It was a civilization living in harmony with the planet's own frequency. A golden age of clean, resonant energy. And then someone turned it off. If a global, free energy civilization existed, a civilization that built these humming bridges and star forts, surely we would see remnants of it? Surely there would be photographs. We do. But we are told to look at them and see something else. We are told they were temporary. Enter the strange and confusing history of the late 19th century, World's Fairs, or Expositions. Chicago, 1893. St. Louis, 1904. San Francisco, 1915. The official story is mind-boggling. We are told that in the horse and buggy era, cities that were barely developed, places that were little more than frontier towns, managed to build massive, sprawling metropolises of neoclassical grandeur in just 2 years. We are talking about hundreds of acres of domes, towers, electric lights, and moving sidewalks. They called them the White Cities. And then, as soon as the fair was over, they blew them up. They bulldozed them into the water. They set them on fire. Why? The historians say they were built of staff, a temporary mixture of plaster, hemp, and horsehair, and weren't meant to last. They say it was just a show. But look at the photos. Does that look like plaster to you? Look at the sheer scale, the intricate masonry, the massive statues that stood atop the domes. The Chicago World's Fair had the first comprehensive electric light display on Earth. It looked like a city from the future, yet it was supposedly built by men using wooden scaffolding and handsaws in the middle of a muddy field. The alternative theory suggests a much darker reality. These weren't built for the fair. They were the remnants of the Tartarian cities, the old world. The inheritors dug them out of the mud, cleaned them up, turned the power on for one last hurrah to study the tech, and then destroyed them to hide the evidence. They told the public, "Look what we built. Look how advanced we are." They claimed the credit for a legacy that wasn't theirs, establishing their authority over the new world before crumbling it to dust so no one could study the engineering. It was the ultimate gaslight. A way to erase the past by displaying it in plain sight, then claiming it was all just a temporary fantasy. This leads us to the most disturbing realization. This wasn't an accident. It was a reset. If the mud flood buried the lower levels, and the World's Fairs destroyed the upper levels, then the bridges are the only thing left connecting us to the truth. They were too useful to destroy. We needed to cross the rivers to build our new industrial world. So they stripped them. They lobotomized the machines. They removed the metal resonators from the tops of the obelisks on the bridges. They removed the tech from the piers. They plastered over the access doors to the inner chambers. They rewrote the history books to say that Roman concrete was a mystery we just forgot, rather than a technology we actively suppressed. Think about the timeline. The Tartarian Empire vanishes from maps in the mid-19th century. Simultaneously, we see the rise of the robber barons, the industrialists of coal, oil, and steel. Rockefeller, Carnegie, Morgan, free energy, atmospheric energy gathered by stone and water, is bad for business if you're selling oil. If the world realized that the cathedrals and bridges were free energy devices, that the very air we breathe could power our homes, the entire energy economy would collapse. So, the history was sanitized. The machines became monuments. The energy grid became a tourist attraction. And we were taught that our ancestors were primitive people, banging rocks together, rather than the masters of a frequency science we are only just beginning to understand. Next time you stand on an ancient bridge, look down. Don't just look at the view. Look at the stone. Feel the vibration of the structure. Ask yourself why a simple crossing required the precision of a watchmaker and the mass of a mountain. We are walking on the bones of a giant. We are living in the ruins of a civilization that might have solved the problems we are currently facing. Energy, sustainability, harmony with nature. We look at their ruins and call them tombs or temples, never suspecting that we are standing inside the engine room of a dead power plant. The official story says it is all coincidence. They say the mud buried the windows by accident. They say the star forts are just bunkers. They say the bridges are just roads. But the stones are silent witnesses. They tell a story of a world that was connected not just by trade but by energy. A world that hummed with a power we have forgotten how to hear. Were they bridges? Or were they machines? The answer might be buried deep in the mud, waiting for us to dig it up. What do you think? Are we the pinnacle of civilization? Or are we the survivors wandering through the wreckage of a golden age? Dig into the research yourself. Look at the old maps. Look at the basement windows in your own city. And if you want to keep exploring the lost history of the world with us, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. The truth is deeper than you think. Thanks for watching.